Good day, beautiful people. Welcome once again to your favorite program, our favorite program, The Conversation, coming to you from TV 360 here in Lagos, Nigeria. My name is Nelson Ekujumi, and today we are having a special package of The Conversation. And on The Conversation today, we want to look at the times and life of former President Muhammadu Buhari. Former President Muhammadu Buhari was laid to Mother Earth on Wednesday, the 15th of July 2025. He was given a state funeral by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. You recollect that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration declared on Sunday, 13th of July 2025, when President Muhammadu Buhari passed on at a hospital in London. He declared that all flags should be flown at half-mast, and that he directed the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and the Chief of Staff and others to go to London to accompany the body home. The Vice President did as instructed by the President, and we also saw tributes have continued to pour into for the late Nigerian leader, President Muhammadu Buhari. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have seen a situation where some persons are trying to distort history. President Muhammadu Buhari, for the records, was born on 17th of December 1942, and he joined the Nigerian Army at the age of 19. President Muhammadu Buhari came into the saddle of leadership in this country, the presidency, or if you say the head of state, first in 1985-83, when the military overthrew the civilian administration of Alhaji Shehu Shagari, and as well, President Muhammadu Buhari came into office again in 2015 under the civilian dispensation. He came into office under the banner of the All Progressive Congress (APC) when he won the presidential election, creating the record of being the first opposition leader to defeat an incumbent President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and he served 2 terms. On both occasions when President Muhammadu Buhari came into office, President Muhammadu Buhari came into office at a time when the country was facing economic and moral crisis. In 1983, when he first assumed the mantle of leadership as military head of state, he came in when the administration of late former President Shehu Shagari had driven the economy of the Nigerian state aground, and the level of decay and moral decadence was unparalleled. But President Muhammadu Buhari came into office. He came into office as a disciplinarian, a strict military officer, and his administration then introduced what was widely known as the war against indiscipline, kick against indiscipline, KAI, and the administration ensured that the indiscipline that had become the way of life of the Nigerian people was turned around. That was the time when the Nigerian gets to the bus stop or into the bank or any environment, people maintain an orderly queue. And in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari also came into office as civilian administration at a time when the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan had driven the Nigerian economy to the point of recession, if not recession. Because I remember in 2022, September precisely, when the former Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, now the DG of the World Trade Organization (WTO), Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, publicly proclaimed that the federal government was borrowing to pay salaries. And when President Muhammadu Buhari came into office, one of the first things he did was that he gave bailout funds to state governments who were unable to pay salaries and emoluments of workers. We had over 26 states owing salaries, and some were owing as much as 6 months, some were owing almost 2 years. And President Muhammadu Buhari, at every interval from 2015, he was giving out bailout to states to be able to pay salaries. Under President Muhammadu Buhari, we also saw a resurgence in the fight against insecurity. Before President Muhammadu Buhari came into office, under his predecessor, Boko Haram was in control of a large part of the state of Borno and some other parts of the northeast. But under President Muhammadu Buhari, Boko Haram was defeated, even though later Boko Haram, put on another face. They became bandits, kidnappers, and what have you. In fact, this insecurity under his predecessor was so bad that the terrorists were almost advancing into the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. In fact, in some parts of the southwest, the cells of the terrorists were already springing up in states like Kogi, Kwara, and even some of them were arrested here in Lagos. That was how bad it was then, before President Muhammadu Buhari came into office. That the Boko Haram group, a terrorist group, even attacked the United Nations building in Abuja and bombed it, resulting in loss of human lives and destruction to that building and properties. But when President Muhammadu Buhari assumed the reins of power, he gave the terrorists a run for their money. Under President Muhammadu Buhari, the Nigerian military, I recollect, a former chief of air staff, openly admitted that before the advent of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, that the Nigerian Air Force had only one fighter jet. But by the time President Muhammadu Buhari was leaving office after 8 years, the Nigerian Air Force purchased all sorts of fighter jets, even including Tucano. The fleet of the Nigerian Air Force increased to almost the size, increased to about 50 or thereabout. Even the Nigerian Army, they were equipped, all facets of the Nigerian security apparatus were equipped with modern technological gadgets, even including the Nigerian Army. That the Nigerian Army also, under President Muhammadu Buhari, the Nigerian Army also were assessed fighter jets, for military military engagements. So President Muhammadu Buhari came at a time to rescue Nigeria. His coming was divine. And also, I will refresh the memory of our viewers. When President Muhammadu Buhari came into office, under his administration, he started the construction of the second Niger Bridge, and he completed it. This was a means of an avenue for transportation to boost the economic life of the Southeast that previous administrations had made promises, had even laid the sod of building that gateway to the east, second gateway to the east, but they never put anything on ground until they come into office of President Muhammadu Buhari. You also talk about the railway stations. As a young boy, I remember in the 80s, I used to go to Ido Terminus to accompany my elder brother who was traveling when then my elder brother was a student in one of the federal government colleges up north. That was where that station, Ido Terminus, NRC Terminus in Ido, Lagos here, where parents take their children to when the children are returning back to school. But that means of transportation, the trains, became a thing of the past, became like a museum since the 80s. It took the intervention or the coming into office of President Buhari in 2015 to revitalize that essential means of transportation in our country. Today, President Muhammadu Buhari built train stations between Lagos and Oyo State, Ibadan, that you can travel by train through on the standard gauge, not the narrow gauge. Standard gauge. We still have the narrow gauge there, but he constructed the standard gauge from Lagos to Ibadan. We also have one from Abuja to Kaduna. We also have another one from Warri to Itakpe. You talk about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. That road was constructed under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. You talk about the Lagos-Apapa Oshodi Expressway. I wish we can have pictures of what the Apapa Oshodi Expressway was and the Apapa Ijora, Apapa Port way in Ijora. How that road, before President Muhammadu Buhari, on those expressway that I'm talking about now, if my editor is putting on the visuals, that was an area where economic life and social life had come to a standstill for the inhabitants of Apapa. To access the Nigerian ports, either the Apapa port or the Tinkan port, the only means of transportation before the coming into office of President Muhammadu Buhari was through what we call Okada, motorcycles. No vehicle can go in there, and that reflected on the economic, livelihood of the people of Apapa, that Apapa became a ghost town. That was the famous Apapa where we have the GRA, that housed a former premier of the Western region. I'm talking of late Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Chief Obafemi Awolowo lived in Park Lane, Apapa. Even a leader of the then opposition and leader of NADECO, chairman of NADECO at a point in time, Chief Ibrahim Adesoya, also was a resident in Apapa. But before the advent of President Muhammadu Buhari, the economy of Apapa totally collapsed. The only vehicles you see on that road were trucks. And those trucks, because of the poor state of the road, were falling on each other. They were falling on people. A lot of Nigerians lost their lives. Some were maimed. You can imagine the picture of Apapa under previous administration before President Muhammadu Buhari came into office. Then you talk about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, among others. Under President Muhammadu Buhari, I will tell you for free as a Nigerian. Under his predecessors, that was a journey of between Lagos and Ibadan. That is about 117 kilometers, if I'm correct. That at times, we travel on that road for 1 hour, 30 minutes. Became a nightmare. That was a road in which Nigerians spent 7 hours. At times on that road, we spent a whole day traveling between Lagos and Ibadan. But today, because of the infrastructural renewal of President Muhammadu Buhari, you can travel on that road and close your eyes. When President Muhammadu Buhari assumed the reins of power, he came into office at a very difficult time for the Nigerian economy. By the time he assumed power, the price of crude oil had dropped internationally from about $70 per barrel to about $28 per barrel. And President Muhammadu Buhari was also confronted with the economic sabotage by criminals calling themselves militants, Niger Delta Avengers, who were bombing oil pipelines and oil platforms that plummeted the Nigerian crude oil production from about 2.1 million barrels per day that we produce consistently under former President Goodluck Jonathan. It plummeted to 500,000 barrels per day. Coupled with the infrastructural renewal of President Muhammadu Buhari, President Muhammadu Buhari came into office and presided over the affairs of Nigeria at a time the global economy suffered a collapse as a result of COVID-19, of which this year, 2025, 5-6 years after, we're still grappling with the effect of COVID-19. The infrastructural renewal that took place under President Muhammadu Buhari, is it in terms of road, bridges, railway, airports, power stations, health institutions, tertiary health institutions, and also for the first time in a long time, the President Muhammadu Buhari administration introduced the social welfare, the social welfare scheme, where vulnerable Nigerians, the lowest of the poor, were getting monthly stipends. The investment of President Muhammadu Buhari administration in agriculture is unparalleled. Who can forget the Anchors Borrower Scheme, where the government plowed a large chunk of funds, over a billion naira, close to $1 trillion, into rice production, such that even when COVID-19 came and the whole world economy was shut down, Nigeria was able to sustain in feeding its people sustain its food self-sufficiency because of the agricultural policies put in place by President Muhammadu Buhari. Don't also forget that when he came into office, because of the paucity of funds as well as the fragility of the economy, the President Muhammadu Buhari administration placed a ban on 43 items, including toothpick. Nigerians were importing everything under the sun. As a young boy growing up, I grew up to hear I never saw Abakaliki rice. But under President Muhammadu Buhari, we saw lake rice. We saw lake rice, that's a collaboration between Lagos and Kebbi State. I saw Abakaliki rice. We saw Gombe rice. We saw Kaduna rice. There were no brands of local rice that was not in the market for Nigerians to access. All because of this great leader, this selfless leader, this incorruptible leader, this icon of democracy. And I cannot also forget, or I must mention, President Muhammadu Buhari's historic feat in acknowledging June 12th as Nigeria's Democracy Day. This was unparalleled because since the conduct of the June 12, 1993 presidential election that was annulled by one of President Muhammadu Buhari's predecessor, retired General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, no government after then had been courageous enough to acknowledge that June 12 was the day Nigerians spoke with one voice, devoid of ethnic or religious sentiments. It was the day Nigerians decided to put their destiny in their hands and say enough is enough to military dictatorship. But it was treasonably annulled by the military of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. President Muhammadu Buhari acknowledged that day as Nigeria's Democracy Day and even went ahead to bestow the national honor, the highest national honor in the land, GCFR, on the winner of that election, former President Moshood Kashimawe Olawale Abiola, as well as the second highest national honor on his running mate, then vice presidential candidate Alhaji Babagana Kingibe. President Muhammadu Buhari, even when the 2023 election was conducted and the opposition parties were crying foul, a former president of this country and a former head of state wrote a letter to President Muhammadu Buhari to annul the election. But President Muhammadu Buhari, being a Democrat, a soldier-turned-Democrat, replied that he didn't have the powers under the Constitution to annul an election that has been conducted. And that was the basic fact under our laws. That also emphasized, or that is also meant to reiterate the democratic credentials of this great Nigerian. President Muhammadu Buhari, for a large part of his life, was in public service. He served Nigeria as a military head of state, as a soldier from 1962, when he joined the military as a cadet, up to the year 1985, when he was ousted in a military coup by General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, and he was incarcerated for almost 3 years. President Muhammadu Buhari then came into office again in 2015. And throughout his public life, he was known as Mai Gaskiya. He lived a selfless life. He was a disciplinarian. The war against indiscipline, the war against corruption, who can forget President Muhammadu Buhari's administration policy of whistleblowing with regards to the re-engineering of the war against corruption? Who can also forget that it was under President Muhammadu Buhari that we discovered that under his predecessor, $2.1 billion was allocated for the war against insurgency, war against terrorism, but that money went into private pockets. There was the case of a former governor of Sokoto State, Atahiru Bafarawa, who claimed he was given 4.6 billion naira to go and pray. We also have so many, the security funds under the Office of the National Security Advisor then the fund was known as the Dasuki Gate, became a bazaar. People were giving money to go and sing, so that security would be a thing of the past. And that was the mess, security-wise, that President Muhammadu Buhari inherited. Who can forget how President Muhammadu Buhari's administration held tight to the Nigerian economy despite the havoc wreaked by COVID-19. And together, we weathered the storm. Who also can forget President Muhammadu Buhari's legacy as a leader who walked the talk, a leader who put the interests of Nigeria first, and in all things that he did. And he always admonished Nigerians. He was a man who believed, lived, and died for Nigeria. And that was why President Muhammadu Buhari would tell you when he was alive that we must eat what we produce and we must produce what we eat. He was a man lived to an austere life. He was a very simple, humble, down to earth. He was a leader who would say it as he sees it. He was a humorous man. He was a devout Muslim, a man who never toyed with worshiping his maker. He was a good family man, and that can be gleaned from his wife and children. President Muhammadu Buhari meant so many things to so many people. For some of us who looked at him from afar, we saw in former President Muhammadu Buhari a leader extraordinary. We saw in President Muhammadu Buhari a motivator. We saw in former President Muhammadu Buhari a role model. We saw in President Muhammadu Buhari a selfless leader. We saw in President Muhammadu Buhari a man of integrity. We saw in President Muhammadu Buhari a man of untainted character. As President Muhammadu Buhari is laid to rest, we on the conversation, we can only wish his immediate family, the wife and children, that God will console them and strengthen them. We pray for the people of Daura, his community, where he comes from in Katsina State, as well as the government of Katsina State, and the government and people of Nigeria, that God will console us all. And to President Muhammadu Buhari, we pray that the Almighty Allah will grant his soul Al-Jannat Firdaus. Until we meet to part no more, the legacy of President Muhammadu Buhari, while alive, is a treasure that we'll continue to hold on to. Is a treasure that we'll continue to use as a testimonial of a man who came, who lived, who played his parts, and went to his maker in a blaze of glory. To President Muhammadu Buhari, we say, rest in peace till we meet to part no more. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we call it a wrap on the conversation today. It has been a special edition in memory of the life and times of our former president, President Muhammadu Buhari. Till we meet again next time, continue to watch the conversation coming to you from TV 360 here in Lagos, Nigeria. Have a great day and bye-bye.